let's look at a couple of examples using inverse trig. So I've got this triangle here. I've got this right triangle. Remember, trig is right triangles. Right triangles. I've got my angle here, x, okay? If that's x, that means this is adjacent. This is opposite. And this is hypotenuse. So those are my three sides. So the question is, what the heck is that angle? Well, I'm not psychic, so I can't figure it out, but I can use inverse trig. So let's figure out which function we're going to use. Remember, you have SOHCAHTOA. So you've got sine, opposite hypotenuse, cosine, adjacent hypotenuse, tangent, opposite, adjacent. Well, here, what do I have? I have opposite and I have adjacent. So I'm going to be using tangent. So the tangent of x degrees, because we don't know what x is, that's what we're trying to find, is equal to the ratio 4 over 5. What angle gives us a ratio of 4 over 5 for opposite and adjacent? And remember, we talked about this. Now we're going to get rid of that function. We're going to inverse both sides. We're going to undo the tangent basically on one side. So what happens is those go away. I'm left with x because I did the inverse. And then I'm left with the inverse tangent of 4 over 5. So basically what it's asking is, if the ratio of opposite to adjacent is 4 over 5, what's my angle? Well, I'm going to go into my calculator, and I don't have the calculator with me, I have it on the screen here. I'm going to hit second, and I'm going to hit tangent. Second tangent will give me the inverse, and then I'm going to do 4 divided by 5. If I can find the division symbol here. Wow. So it'll be 4 divided by 5. Okay. Now, oops, I'm looking for the division symbol. So when I do that, sorry, it's taking a little while, I get 38.65. Now this is not telling you to round to any particular number, so I'm just going to go to one decimal place. So I'll get 38.7 degrees. So this angle right here is 38.7 degrees because the opposite to adjacent ratio is 4 over 5. So now let's look at the next one. We'll do the same thing. So let's figure out our function here. If I want to figure out my function on this one, here's my angle. That means this is adjacent. This is opposite, and this is hypotenuse. Always label your triangles, guys. Always label them. Unless you're doing multiple trig functions, in which case they will change. If you're just looking and zeroing in on a single angle, always label your triangles. So which function, or which pieces do we have? We've got the adjacent, and we've got the hypotenuse. So which one of these is adjacent over hypotenuse? And that is cosine. You can't see that, but in SOHCAHTOA, that's cosine. You can see it right here. Okay, so I'm going to come down here and I'm going to use the cosine ratio. So I know that the cosine of x degrees, we don't know x, is going to equal the adjacent ratio, the adjacent to hypotenuse ratio. Do I have to reduce 8 over 18? Can I? Yes. Do I need to? No. Because any ratio that gives me the same thing as 8 over 18 will give me the same answer. I could reduce it if I wanted to, and I'll show you that in just a second, but I'm not going to do it right now. So I'm going to go back to our favorite. I'm going to cross multiply. 8 times 1 is 8. I'm going to do cosine of x. So I'm going to do cosine, cosine of x. I'm going to have cosine of x times 18. So I'm going to end up with 18 times cosine of x, okay? And I don't know the angle. I don't know the angle. Now that's the cross multiplying. If I want to do this, I can, and I can divide both sides by 18, but what's going to happen? I'm going to end up in the same place I started, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to inverse it. So I'm going to go back to the original, 8 over 18, and I'm just going to inverse both sides. And that's what I wanted to show you. A lot of you like to cross multiply every time, and you can't do that every time, because if I cross multiply this, where does it get me? Where I started. That's why you have to have the inverse functions. So I'm going to inverse both sides. I like showing you every possible mistake you can make, because then it shows you what you tend to do and what you shouldn't do. So when the inverses cut these out, this leaves you with just x, and then I have the inverse cosine of 8 over 18. So I'm going to go to my calculator, and I'm going to hit second cosine, second cosine, and then I'm going to do 8 divided by 18, and that's going to give me 63.6 degrees. So this angle over here is 63.6 degrees. That's how you find your angles. Now, go back to my question. What happens if I reduce this? Well, how can I reduce 8 over 18? Well, when I reduce 8 over 18, 8 over 18 will actually reduce to 4 over 9. If I were to do the arc cosine or the inverse cosine of 4 over 9, guess what? I will still get 63.6 because these ratios are equal. As long as it's the same ratio, it has to create the same angle in a right triangle, which is what the neat thing about trig is. So that's how you use it, the inverse function here for these.